The great power rivalry is hurting the Pacific, and the island nations are looking to India for some respite. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting the region, and everywhere he goes, he's getting a red carpet welcome. Today, Prime Minister Modi was in Sydney. Australia is the third and final stop of this tour. He addressed a mega community event and was greeted like a rock star. A crowd of 20,000 people turned up to see him. Our next report brings you the highlights.
Before the Indian Prime Minister travelled to Australia, this picture went viral. That's Prime Minister Narendra Modi dressed like a rock star performing at a music concert. Before you say fake news, allow us to confirm this image was generated by an artificial intelligence tool. It is indeed a fake. But maybe this AI tool was trying to tell us something. Because Prime Minister Modi's celebrity persona was on showcase today. The occasion was a community event. It had all the hallmarks of a rock concert. A crowd of 20,000 people filled the Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney. There were cultural performances. The crowds cheered for the Indian Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister made his way inside the stadium with his Australian counterpart, Anthony Albanese. Prime Minister Albanese was the first leader to speak, and he made a candid admission. To him, Prime Minister Modi's visit overshadowed a real rock star.
I said to my friend, the Prime Minister, before, the last time I saw someone on the stage here was Bruce Springsteen, and he didn't get the welcome that Prime Minister Modi has got. Prime Minister Modi is the boss.
The grand event was a celebration of the India-Australia relationship. Prime Minister Albanese and his team went all out to demonstrate Australia's special relationship with India. At the reception, the two leaders revealed a plaque. Australia will rename a suburb in Sydney. A hub called Harris Park will now be known as Little India. The Indian Prime Minister reciprocated. In his address, he highlighted India's deepening ties with Australia.
साथियों, एक समय था जब कहा जाता था कि भारत ऑस्ट्रेलिया के संबंधों को 3C डिफाइन करते हैं। ऐसा पहले कहा जाता था। ये कौन से 3C हैं? कॉमनवेल्थ, क्रिकेट और करी। इसके बाद कहा गया कि भारत ऑस्ट्रेलिया के संबंध 3D पर आधारित है। डेमोक्रेसी, डायस्पोरा और दोस्ती। लेकिन भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के ऐतिहासिक संबंधों का विस्तार इससे कहीं ज्यादा बड़ा है। और जानते हैं, इन सारे संबंधों का सबसे बड़ा आधार क्या है? जानते हैं? जी नहीं, सबसे बड़ा आधार है म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट और म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट।
Prime Minister Modi followed that up with an announcement. He declared India is expanding its diplomatic ties with Australia. Soon, India will open a new consulate in Brisbane. The new consulate will cater to the growing Indian diaspora in the country. Prime Minister Modi's address had a message for the community. He hailed their contributions to Australia and called them a pillar of strength for the India-Australia relationship.
A mutual trust और म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट सिर्फ भारत ऑस्ट्रेलिया के डिप्लोमेटिक रिश्तों से विकसित नहीं हुआ है, इसकी असली वजह है, इसकी असली ताकत है आप ऑस्ट्रेलिया में रहने वाले हर एक भारतीय। वैसे मैंने सुना है कि हैरिस पार्क में चटका की चाट, जयपुर स्वीट्स की जलेबी, उसका तो कोई जवाब ही नहीं है। मेरी आप सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है, आप लोग कभी मेरे मित्र पीएम एल्बेनीज़ी को भी वहां जरूर ले जाइएगा।
The grand reception highlights India's growing stature in global affairs too, a fact that the Prime Minister underlined as well. He called India's position in the world as the force of global good and a bright spot for the global economy.
मैं ये बात फिर दोहरा रहा हूं, आज दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी और सबसे युवा टैलेंट फैक्ट्री जिस देश में है वो है कोरोना की इस ग्लोबल पैंडेमिक में जिस देश ने दुनिया का सबसे तेज वैक्सीनेशन प्रोग्राम चलाया, वो देश है आज जो देश दुनिया की फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग लार्ज इकोनॉमी है, वो है आज जो देश दुनिया में नंबर 1 स्मार्टफोन डेटा कंज्यूमर है, वो देश है।
On the sidelines, Prime Minister Modi met with several celebrities and influencers. This included pop star Guy Sebastian and celebrity chef and TV host Sarah Todd. Prime Minister Modi's visit now sets the tone of future engagements with Australia. The Indian Prime Minister wants a closer relationship. He has spelled out 2 priorities: defense and security ties. These priorities are aimed at one adversary, China. Beijing has targeted both Canberra and New Delhi with military provocations. But the threat from China doesn't define this partnership. Instead, it's only reinforcing the need for like-minded partners to work together.
Meanwhile, India is working to burnish its credentials as the pharmacy of the world. The pandemic established that. India sent life-saving vaccines and medicines to the whole world. But last year, there was an unfortunate turn of events. Cough syrups exported from India were linked to the deaths of children. Almost 100 children in Gambia and Uzbekistan died. India's reputation took a hit. The government swung into action. It came up with a more comprehensive regulatory mechanism. And the new rules will come into effect soon. All cough syrups meant for export will have to be tested, and this testing will take place in government labs in India. This will serve 2 purposes: regulate pharma companies and allay the fears of importing countries, not to mention protect India's reputation as a pharmaceutical hub. Our next report has more.
India's rise as a global pharmaceutical powerhouse is well known. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it stepped up to help the world with vaccines. India's pharmaceutical sector is renowned for effective medicines at competitive prices. But that reputation has recently taken a hit. It was caused by reports of deaths linked to cough syrups exported from India. Children were the victims of these faulty cough syrups. So, the Indian government rushed to take action. And now it has come out with a new set of rules. From June 1st, all cough syrup exports will need to be tested, that too at government labs. 7 of these labs have been marked for testing. A cough syrup sample will have to be sent to them for checks. Once they clear the tests, they will get a certificate of analysis. Only then can these cough syrups be exported. It's a thorough process to ensure there's no compromise on quality. because lives are at stake. Last October, news of faulty cough syrups emerged from the Gambia. It's a West African country of about 2.7 million people. Reports said that some cough syrups had led to the death of about 70 children. The WHO issued an alert.
WHO has today issued a medical product alert for 4 contaminated medicines identified in the Gambia that have been potentially linked with acute kidney injuries and 66 deaths among children.
The WHO began an investigation. It turned out all of the cough syrups had a common link.
4 medicines are cough and cold syrups produced by Maiden Pharmaceuticals Limited in India. WHO is conducting further investigation with the company and regulatory authorities in India.
The investigations failed to establish a clear link between the deaths and the Indian cough syrups. But then came reports from Uzbekistan. In December, 18 Uzbek children died after taking an Indian cough syrup. It was made by Marion Biotech. It's a pharmaceutical company based in the city of Noida in northern India. In both the Gambia and Uzbekistan, the children had died due to kidney failure. The Uzbek investigation revealed that the cause was toxins in the cough syrup. The toxins are diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol. The same toxins were found in Indian cough syrup exports this year as well. This time in the Pacific Island nations of Micronesia and the Marshall Islands. India had to act fast. You see, India has a $41 billion pharmaceutical industry. It's the world's largest supplier of generic medicines. About a third of all generic drugs are from India. These go across the world, from the Gambia to the US, from the Maldives to Micronesia. Indian drugs are everywhere. So India has to ensure the very best quality. The Indian government stepped up. In March, the Drugs Controller General of India raided about 76 pharmaceutical companies. 18 pharma licenses were cancelled after the raids. And now comes this mandatory testing requirement. It's a welcome step. Hopefully, it can help save lives.
Now let's talk about an actual attack, like the one happening in Russia. The Belgorod region has been under attack since yesterday. This is a region in Russia that borders Ukraine. Some fighters hit multiple villages in the area. Several drones struck Belgorod overnight. The fighting is ongoing. And who's behind this offensive? A group calling themselves the Liberty of Russia Legion has taken responsibility.
We are Russians just like you. We are people just like you. We want our children to grow up in peace and be free people so they can travel, study, and just be happy in a free country. But this has no place in today's Putin's Russia, rotten from corruption, lies, censorship, restrictions on freedoms, repressions. In that Russia where a person's life means less than an official's wallet.
The fighters say they're Russians. They claim to have liberated a village in the Belgorod region and that they're moving towards the town of Grey Voron. Reports say there's one more group involved in the fighting. It's called the Russian Volunteer Corps. And the question is, why are Russians fighting against their own country? Apparently to overthrow Vladimir Putin. Listen to this.
It's time to put an end to the Kremlin's dictatorship. Thanks to all those who support us, to everyone who sends us donations and smokes where necessary. Your support is what every day reminds us of our final goal on Red Square. Be brave and don't be afraid, because we are coming home. Russia will be free.
These groups say they want to bring about regime change in Moscow. The Kremlin says that's a lie, that these attackers are in fact Ukrainian saboteurs.
I'm now in the Grey Voron district. The situation here continues to be extremely tense. A sabotage reconnaissance group entered the territory. The Ministry of Defense and all law enforcement agencies are fulfilling their assigned combat tasks to protect our country. The current situation is that 8 people were injured. According to information from the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Defense, there were no civilian casualties. Once again, the situation is tense and remains so. A counter-terrorist operation was declared. Many restrictions are in place.
That was from yesterday. Russia declared a counter-terrorism operation. It also accused Ukraine of staging the attack on Belgorod as a diversion. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says, and I'm quoting, "We perfectly understand the purpose of such sabotage to divert attention from the Bakhmut direction to minimize the political effect of the loss of Bakhmut by the Ukrainian side." Ukraine, of course, has denied all of this. This is what an advisor to Zelensky posted yesterday. He said Ukraine has no direct involvement in the attacks on Belgorod or any of the attacks in the Russian territory. Kiev maintains that all such attacks on Russian soil have been conducted by dissidents, by groups like the Liberty of Russia Legion. But of course, Kiev has to say that. You see, all the weapons that Ukraine gets from its Western allies come with a clause. They can only be used for defense. They can't be used to attack Russia. But the fact is, there are boots on the ground in Russian territory. They've openly attacked multiple villages in Russia. It marks another stage in the war of attacks inside Russia. We'll have to wait and see how Moscow responds. The debt ceiling has kept Biden occupied. He was supposed to be in Papua New Guinea on Monday. Instead, he was back in Washington. Biden sent his top diplomat in his place. That's Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Blinken had two jobs in Papua New Guinea. A, make up for Biden's absence, and B, close a security agreement. We're focusing on that second one, the U.S. Papua New Guinea Security Agreement. It was signed in Port Moresby on Monday. Here's how Blinken described it.
Under this agreement, our forces will be able to board one another's vessels, share technical expertise, and ultimately better patrol the seas together, which is vital to protecting livelihoods for generations to come. The agreement will also make it easier for PNG and U.S. forces to train together in new ways and in more places as part of our joint effort to uphold peace and security across the Indo-Pacific. We will be fully transparent.
The full text of this agreement has not been released, so naturally there are questions. Students in some universities also staged protests. They say the Pacific is being militarized. To make matters worse, a leaked draft is being circulated. What does it say? Three major things. 1, legal immunity for U.S. soldiers and contractors. 2, free movement for U.S. ships and airplanes. And 3, no migration requirements for U.S. staff. Objectively, that's a lot. But like I said, this is a leaked draft. It's better to wait for the final copy of the agreement to emerge. So let's focus on the confirmed details in the meantime. The U.S. has promised aid worth $45 million. This will be used for security upgradation, climate action, and public health. Blinken says there is nothing to worry, that this deal is just another step in a long-standing relationship. But not many in Papua New Guinea are convinced. So now their Prime Minister has stepped in. Here's what he said, and I'm quoting, "It is not a military base to be set up here for war to be launched. There's a specific clause that says that this partnership is not a partnership for PNG to be used as a place for launching offensive military operations." The Prime Minister is worried about China. They are Papua New Guinea's second largest trading partner, first if you count just the merchandise. So the Prime Minister cannot afford to antagonize Beijing. He needs Chinese trade, investments, and loans. What he doesn't need is a Chinese debt trap. So what does he do? Sign a security agreement with the United States. Like I said, we don't know what the details of the agreement are, but it will increase U.S. presence on the island, that's for sure. It will expand U.S. access to military bases. The question is, how will China respond to all of this? To be honest, they made the first move. In 2022, China signed a security deal with the Solomon Islands. The U.S. was caught off guard. The Pacific was supposed to be their backyard, yet the Chinese managed to score a deal. But then, Beijing made a rookie error. They tried to overplay their hand. How? By trying to sign a security pact with all Pacific islands. That attempt was promptly rejected. It also poked the U.S. into action. Biden first hosted a summit of Pacific leaders at the White House. Now he's got a security deal with Papua New Guinea. What does he want next? Ideally, total control over the Pacific. This region is important for a number of reasons. A, the sheer size. The Pacific makes up around 20% of the Earth's total area, also 28% of all exclusive economic zones. B, the location. It's right in between the US, China, and Australia. If you have a base there, it could be a game changer. You can spy on ships going from Australia to the US. You can deploy assets to the South China Sea. Plus, you can control a major trading route. And that's reason number 3. The resources, mainly fish. The Pacific is by far the most fertile fishing ground in the world. It exports more than 530,000 metric tons of seafood. Guess who's interested in this trade? The Chinese. Their Pacific fishing fleet has grown by 500% since 2012, 500% growth. If you control the Pacific, you control the fishing. China, with 1.4 billion people to feed, needs it. And reason number 4, political and military dominance. The Pacific Islands may be tiny, but they control vast amounts of the ocean. They have 55 times more water than land mass, which means they are a front line. In a battle between Asia and North America, the Pacific will play a key role. It has happened before. During the Second World War, Japan and the US fought for the Pacific. The US won and went on to dominate the region. The question is, will there be a repeat? The people here certainly don't want it, including those in Papua New Guinea. PNG is the biggest Pacific island if you exclude Australia. It is home to some 9 million people. Their priority is not big power rivalries. They want jobs. They want better infrastructure. They want climate action. The Pacific Islands are the most vulnerable to climate change. If the oceans rise, they lose land. If the typhoons are supercharged, they lose houses. So the Pacific Islands want funds to tackle that. But who's willing to listen? China just wants the resources and military bases. The US just wants to drive out China. Caught in the middle are the people of the Pacific. Old habits die hard, and old politics even worse. Just look at the World Health Organization. Their report card has been dismal. Failed to inform us about the pandemic, failed to advise us about how to deal with it, and then gave a clean chit to China. In my book, that is a fail. But instead of learning from its mistakes, the WHO is back to doing what it does best, pandering to China. How? By refusing entry to Taiwan. The annual World Health Assembly meeting is underway. Dozens of member states and observers are attending. Taiwan also asked for an invite, but once again, the WHO chief refused. Our old friend, Dr. Tedros. He's gotten re-elected as the Director General of the World Health Organization, but instead of shaking things up, he's sticking to the status quo. Hence, no Taiwan. China is celebrating the decision. Their envoy says it's a validation of the One China policy. Listen to this.
The WHO has rejected Taiwan-related proposals for 7 consecutive years, which fully evidences that the One China principle has won universal support from the international community and represents the trend of the world and is in line with people's aspiration. It also shows once again that hyping up Taiwan-related issues at the WHO Assembly will get nowhere and is unpopular.
Some background here. Taiwan used to attend meetings of the World Health Assembly, but that changed in 2017. Elections the year before, in 2016, brought President Tsai Ing-wen to office in Taiwan. She's fiercely anti-China. So starting 2017, Beijing began blocking Taiwan. What does that say? This is vindictive politics by China. It's their way of punishing Taiwanese nationals. But what's the solution? Taiwan is an island of 23 million people. It's one of the most advanced economies in Asia. Surely their contributions will be vital. Just look at the Wuhan virus outbreak. Taiwan's initial response was the gold standard. They had reported just 10 deaths by May 2021. The Omicron wave did hurt them, but that first response was unparalleled. Plus, Taiwan had close access to Chinese patients. Their patient zero was a teacher from Wuhan. This gave Taiwan more insight into the virus than any other country. But the WHO did not care. Throughout the pandemic, they blocked Taiwan. They caved into Chinese pressure. Could the WHO have done something different? Well, Western countries do think so. They've been asking Dr. Tedros to personally invite Taiwan. Forget the member states. Just send an invitation yourself. But Tedros has repeatedly refused. He says he doesn't have the power, that all decisions must be taken by the member states. Well then, the member states also wanted action against China. They also wanted to investigate the origins of the Wuhan virus. Why wasn't Dr. Tedros excited about that? His politics is risking global health. It is denying a basic human right to 23 million Taiwanese. And for what? To stay on China's good books? That was the argument during the pandemic, that China's support was necessary to fight the pandemic, to gather details about the virus. And how is that going, we ask? 3 years later, China is still blocking an independent investigation. It's not like they've thrown open the labs. So the WHO's argument doesn't work anymore. One China or two China or no China, Beijing will not share details about the virus. So might as well do the right thing. As for the WHO's organizational compulsions, it's a laughable argument, really. Do you remember this picture? It shows envoys of a fictional country at a United Nations conference. You may have heard about it. Kailasa is a fake country run by fugitive godman Nityanand. Even they managed to attend a United Nations event. But Taiwan can't. Just how absurd is that? A fictional country versus a democracy of 23 million people. There is a point where human good should override politics, and the pandemic was one such point. More than 6.8 million people have died from the Wuhan virus. Taiwan is one of the few countries that escaped almost unscathed. So having them on board is not a value addition, it's an absolute necessity. If not, we are setting the stage for another pandemic. Dr. Tedros keeps asking the world to prepare better. Maybe he should start with himself, invite Taiwan and make our planet safer and healthier. For our last story tonight, let's talk about parenting. They say having children is like living in a frat house. No one sleeps, everything is broken, and there's a lot of throwing up. But jokes aside, the struggle is real. Because while parenthood is rewarding, it can also be exhausting. Raising a child is hard. Many say the hardest job in the world. According to a recent survey, 2/3 of parents say it's harder than they'd expected. And this is not in their heads. Research says parenting is more demanding than it used to be. Today, parents spend more time and money on their children than previous generations. They feel more pressure to be hands-on. And this can feel like a juggling contest, a balancing act between taking care of children and managing your own well-being. And guess which of the two takes a hit? It's usually the parents' energy and well-being, and the result is this: parental burnout. No, this is not a buzzword or a Western concept or an excuse to do less. Parental burnout is real. It affects tens of millions of parents across the world. In fact, it's probably existed for centuries, only the term is new. Think about it. The term parenting itself is relatively new. Fun fact, rather a sad fact, parenting wasn't recognized as a word in the dictionary until the 1950s. It only became widely used in the 1970s, but because of this shift, child rearing came to be seen as a task, a concept that pushes people to do more, to be more successful as parents. And this leads to pressure and then to burnout in some cases. So what is parental burnout? A lot like workplace burnout, except here parents face physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. And this is thanks to the seemingly endless demands of caring for one's children. It's a syndrome that results from chronic parenting stress. It involves fatigue, irritability, body aches, and changes in sleeping patterns or appetite. If you show these signs, ask yourself these questions. Do you experience constant exhaustion, physical or emotional? Do you feel like you aren't doing enough? Do you feel overwhelmed with the role of being a parent, and do you feel emotionally disconnected? If you do, you may be suffering from parental burnout, and there is no shame in it. There are many out there like you. Parental burnout is a global phenomenon experienced across communities and cultures. It's highest in countries like Poland, Belgium, and the US. About 8% of all parents in these countries are burnt out. But like I said, the research is new, and these studies don't really cover some Asian countries like India and many African countries. But they do say that parental burnout is vast. Research shows that 60% parents do not routinely relax. 50% say they don't have enough time to do the things they want. And 40% say their tiredness stops them from being the parent they want to be. So what should they do? Experts say take a break. Make time for yourself. It will improve your mental and physical health. It will also help your children and your family. Start by telling yourself it's okay to take a breath, to be kind to yourself, to prioritize yourself. Parenthood can be the most special and rewarding of experiences. Children are like the gifts that keep on giving. But to make the most of it, parents need to set priorities and seek help if they're burnt out. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with India. The Natu fever has reached the G20 summit, the meeting happening in Kashmir. Actor Ram Charan made delegates dance to the song. In England, water buffaloes took a dip in a new private swimming pool in Essex. The owners of the pool have sought compensation. They say the animals have ruined their pool worth over $80,000. And in Guatemala, some cliff divers took their skill and love for adventure to a new height. And finally, what makes this day, the 23rd of May, significant? We're taking you back in history. On this day in 1915, Italy declared war on Austria and Hungary, and with that, Rome entered the World War on the side of the original allies, Britain, France, Russia. Initially, when the war broke out in 1914, Italy chose to be neutral in the conflict. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony. The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.